Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Gary Summers, and welcome to Mind, Body, Soul, a show about your mental, physical, and spiritual wellness. One area of mental health that often gets overlooked is that of children. My guest today is a registered psychologist for 25 years who works both in private practice and for the Newfoundland and Labrador Eastern School District as an educational psychologist. In a private practice, Mindful Matters, Florence specializes in treating anxiety disorders as well as diagnosing ADHD and learning disabilities. Welcome, Florence Strang.
Thank you, Gary. It's good to be here.
Florence, when we talked about the program, and you're going to be on again next week with somebody else talking about something totally different.
Yes.
Give listeners a preview of what they can expect to hear over the next 30 minutes or so.
As you already alluded to, my area of specialty is treating anxiety disorders in children, one of my areas of specialty. And I think children's mental health is an area that often gets overlooked. I'm happy to say that since initiatives like Bell Let's Talk started, that the stigma is going away from mental health in general, and people are more willing to look for help. But there are still a lot of children who they definitely get overlooked. So the Canadian Mental Health Association tells us, for example, that 1 in 5 children and youth will have a mental illness or disorder. So that's 1.2 million children in Canada, but less than 20% actually get the help they need. And if we look at the adult population of people who have mental illness and disorders, 70% of those started in childhood. For example, in my private practice, I treat a lot of people who have OCD, and that can start as early as 10 years old.
Are there any triggers that may initially cause it? Is it a tough upbringing? Is it certain things that you might say to a child that may cause them to not feel well? Is there a heredity component to it, or?
Absolutely, you're hitting the nail there. It is nature and nurture. It's both. So if there is a predisposition in the family, a genetic history of mental illness, anxiety disorders, OCD, and if you look at disorders such as autism, ADHD, there's often that genetic link. But as epigenetics tells us, we are not our genes. So there's an interaction with the environment as well. So a child who, for example, may have had no genetic predisposition but have had traumatic things happen to them, they're more likely to develop a disorder.
So obviously parents play a big impact in the child's development. So if a child sees the parent doing something, then they are probably going to mimic that same behavior, right?
Yeah, and I tell parents time and time again, and teachers as well, that we as adults are the best emotional regulators to our children and to other adults. So if your child is feeling anxious or angry or escalated, and in response you get anxious or angry or escalated, then that's not going to help matters. So if you manage to stay calm, you can, trigger that response in the child.
So that becomes a learned response that, well, mom did it, dad did it, so now I'm going to do it. So parents need to be aware that not only of their good qualities, but of their bad qualities as well.
There's actually a funny example I use with people. If you look at a child, say 2 or 3 years old, and they fall down and scrape their knee, the first thing they do, they don't usually cry, they look to the adult to see the adult reaction. So often, it may be the moms who might say, oh my God, let me see, get her to a hospital, get the Band-Aids, and then the child will react in that way. And not always, but sometimes you'll see like a dad or a mom say, oh, you're fine, just brush that off, and the child will go about. So they look, and if you look at our biology, there's a thing called mirror neurons behind the eye, and that's how we gauge our emotional reaction is from other people.
Based on other people,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Florence, can you talk about mindfulness and how it plays a big part in treating kids who have anxiety issues or stress issues?
Excellent question. Yes, and I've been using mindfulness techniques myself for over 25 years, both in my own practice and with people. I didn't always call it mindfulness. That became a buzzword in the past probably 7 or 8 years. In the school system and in my private practice, I would teach stress management for kids and relaxation strategies for kids and that kind of thing. But basically, it's just helping children and adults learn how to manage their emotions by bringing their mind to the present moment. Because if you think about it, the majority of mental and anguish and suffering that all of us experience, everyone who's listening and people in this room, it's not because of what is happening right now in this present moment. So this present moment is good. We're safe, There's no threat to us. So we should technically be at peace in our minds. But if we allow our minds to go back to unpleasant memories of the past or worry about what might happen in the future, the what ifs, then that causes the mental anguish and suffering. So training our mind, mindfulness is a matter of training our minds to come back to the present moment.
I know you've written a book about the mindful turtle.
Yes.
So let's get into the book, I guess, and maybe you can give people some strategies. How do you pump that brake and get into that Zen moment or that moment of now when, like you said, we're at peace now?
Yes.
Everything is fine.
We can't be 100% of our time in the present moment, because I do have to plan.
Absolutely.
Is there food in the fridge, and did I pay my bills? So your mind can't constantly be in the present. But the more time you bring your mind back to the present moment, the more at peace you will be, and the better mental health you'll experience. So I wrote the book, The Mindful Turtle, to teach children the very simple skill of mindfulness. It's simple, yet one of the most powerful tools I've ever used.
But it can also apply to adults as well, correct?
100%. And actually the cover of the children's storybook says recommended for kids ages 5 to 99. And I've had a lot of adults get the book for the kids and then say, wow, this really helped me or helped me and my wife to learn how to bring our minds back to the present moment. So there are plenty of techniques you could use to bring about present mind awareness, but probably the simplest one is just to use your 5 senses. So in the book, The Mindful Turtle, there's a very stressed out squirrel who is worried about not collecting enough food for the winter and what might happen to him if he gets captured. And he's thinking about what happened to him last winter. So the Mindful Turtle teaches him to bring his mind back to the present moment by taking a 5-minute stroll where he asks him to look around you. What do you see right now? Stop and listen for a moment. What do you hear right now? And then he'll smell the air, so the fall, crisp fall air, what he smells, feeling the sun and the wind on his body, so that's the sense of touch. And finally, he hands him an acorn to eat to slow down and focus on his sense of taste. And after that 5 minutes, the squirrel's feeling very relaxed. And he said, how did you do it? You know, I was stressed out 5 minutes ago. And that's where the mindful turtle points out, well, you spent the first 5 minutes after we met talking about the past, which made you feel sad. You spent the next 5 minutes worrying about the future, which made you feel anxious. And you spent 5 minutes in the present moment, which brought you peace. So it is a very simple concept, but it is a very powerful concept. And time again, I have treated people who are to the point of a panic attack just by bringing their mind back to the present moment. And in my purse, I generally carry around my little mindfulness kit. So there's unscented hand cream, so they can focus in on the sense of touch, peppermint oil for smell, and I'll bring candy, like Skittles, so they can focus in on taste. I remember talking to one young teenage girl. She was actually in a panic attack, and I said, on a scale of 1 to 10, where's your anxiety right now? And she was probably an 8 or an 8.5. I'm feeling really anxious, and she was hyperventilating. And I just asked her to sit with me and do some deep breaths, and then I started, giving her, look around, what do you see? Stop and listen, what do you hear? And then I got her to apply the hand cream and so on. And literally after 5 minutes, her anxiety went from about an 8.5 to a 4, just by bringing her mind back to the present moment.
We talked about mindfulness and using your senses to bring you back to now.
Right.
Do you have any other techniques you can talk about?
Absolutely. There are many ways of practicing mindfulness, and my favorite writer on the topic is Thich Nhat Hanh, and he says one could even be mindful of washing dishes if you bring your whole attention to the act of washing the dishes. So using your senses is probably the simplest and easiest way to practice bring your mind to the present moment, and that's why I use it to teach children and to introduce adults to it. But on a deeper level, we can become mindful of our body sensations, we can become mindful of our thoughts, and become mindful of our emotions. And on the deepest level, we are able to be mindful and recognize and aware of those things without judgment. That's the key. And this is one of the big ones when I'm working with people who experience anxiety, is that our thoughts are the things that often make us anxious. And you gave a great example, Gary, when you said, my child is going away on a trip tomorrow. I'm really worried about what might happen. And in our minds, we'll concoct all of these big scenarios. And as Mark Twain once said, I've lived through a lot of terrible things in my life, and some of them actually happened to me.
I say it all the time. It's a great quote.
Absolutely. So most of the what ifs never come to be, but we cause ourselves suffering by thinking about them. So if you become an objective observer of your thoughts, and I'll sometimes get my clients to just sit back and look at that thought and say, okay, I just had that thought, but it's only a thought. It's just a thought. A thought can't hurt me. So you can see how you bringing awareness to all those things, your body, your thoughts, your feelings, and what's happening inside you and all around you.
One of the sessions we had a little while ago, and Claudette looked at me and she said, I think I had an aha moment. Mm-hmm. And I think the point when we talked about when you have that thought, or you wake up in the morning and there's a gray cloud over your head.
Yeah.
And the first thing you say is, well, there must be something wrong because I'm not feeling well. And then you'll search and find something wrong. Mm-hmm. But when you said something about you don't assign a meaning to it, you don't judge it, you just accept the thought.
Yes.
And if you just accept it and just let it go, then it goes, because it's only a thought.
Exactly.
And like you said, a thought can't hurt you. It's the meaning you put behind the thought that hurts you.
Exactly. So practicing mindfulness then is a way of not getting spiraling by your thoughts and not becoming overwhelmed by your emotions. Our bodies can't tell the difference between what's real and what's imagined. So, if someone burst into this room suddenly with a gun, everybody here, we go into fight, flight, or freeze mode. Mm-hmm. So you might want to fight off the gunman. I might want to take flight and run away. And Claudette might freeze and just hope that he doesn't see her sitting there. So that's our built-in primitive survival brain reaction. But if I just sit here and imagine, oh my goodness, what would happen if somebody came in here right now? I can cause the same reaction in my body, like a pounding heart and shallow breathing, just by thinking about something scary happening.
They hooked up athletes to monitors on their muscles and their legs, and they said, okay, now I want you to run this 100-meter race. So they ran the 100-meter race, and the muscles fired the way they're supposed to fire. Mm-hmm. And then they sat them down in a chair, asked them to close their eyes and to run the race in their mind. Mm-hmm. And the muscles fired at exactly the same rate as if they had actually ran the race. So your thoughts precede emotions. Then once you decide the meaning that is to that thought, you go one way or the other.
Yeah.
So you have to be aware of those thoughts.
Definitely. And you just gave another example of how you get caught up in negative thinking. And I've dealt with people in my private practice again who might say, I know I'm going to fail that test. I have a big test coming up, and if I fail it, I won't be able to go back to nursing school. And, I say, you imagine if I was a sports psychologist and you were playing basketball, would I say to you, I want you to go up, dribble, and imagine you're going to miss that shot.
Exactly.
I want you to visualize that you're going to miss that shot. You're almost sure to miss it. So by using the power of our thoughts in this case, as the athletes do, we can sort of set ourselves up for success as well.
The other great example, I interviewed Brad Guzhu when he won the Olympic trials, and he eventually went on and won the gold medal. I think it was 2006 in the Olympics. And someone asked him, why did he take a shot that was way more difficult than the shot that I think Mark Nichols suggested they take? And Brad's answer was so simple, but it was so gold. He said, I could see it in my mind. Mm-hmm. He said, I could see myself making that shot. And another way that I teach people in my practice is visualization.
Definitely.
You can visualize something good happening just as easy as you can visualize something bad happening.
Right.
So when you visualize, it becomes basically a self-fulfilling prophecy. That's what keeps us awake at night.
Yes.
We visualize, I got this meeting tomorrow, and what if people don't like my presentation? What about if I forget things? And the what if? You're basically telling yourself that you're going to fail. And naturally, if you tell yourself enough times you're going to fail,
definitely,
you're going to fail.
Yeah. And bring it all back to like children and mindfulness. We have developed these skills now ourselves, but children, you're not born with a set of coping skills. And often we don't teach children coping skills. So the whole purpose I wrote The Mindful Turtle is to teach children this simple but powerful skill of being mindful, bringing their mind to the present moment. That's actually going to be the first in a 5-part series. So I'm working on my second book in that series now for coping skills called Flossie's Fairy Adventure. And in that, we use the power of affirmations again. So in the story, Flossie is scared of everything. So she's an anxious child. It's based on me, actually, because I was a very anxious child. And how she uses the power of her words to say, I am brave, and facing her fear, which my father would say to me when I was a child, do what you fear and your fear would disappear. And now as a psychologist, we call that exposure response prevention. So it is a powerful psychological tool. So it's taking these powerful psychological tools and putting them in a story that makes it easy to understand for kids.
And kids then read the story, they don't even realize they're learning coping skills.
Yeah.
As opposed to sitting someone down and just trying to talk to them, they kind of tend to shut you out a little bit. So it's a great way to get that message. When you talked about mindfulness and the exercises, I mean, there was a theory many years ago that the mind and body weren't connected.
Mm-hmm.
Now we know that they're connected.
Yes.
When you hold a thought, that's eventually going to manifest itself physically somehow in your body. Can you just talk about how those exercises affect the physical responses in your body?
Again, like you said, it comes back to the mind-body connection and the power of our thoughts. And I often tell people, like, we don't sit there and plan that I'm going to think disturbing thoughts. The thoughts come into our heads unwelcomed or uninvited. But then it's up to you. Do you allow those thoughts to stick around, or do you take control? And I tell people, you are the master of your own thoughts.
Absolutely.
So when the thought comes in, you can spiral with it, or you can take control. So all of these little skills help you take control of your thinking. And it's the thoughts and the emotions that actually cause us the suffering. So once we take control and use these coping skills, it gets control of that.
I've met people who just resolve themselves to the fact that this is not going to get any better. But if we can just, be open-minded to the possibility, and I'm hoping listeners will take some of what you said and what do you have to lose?
Absolutely.
Right? What do you have to lose? Many view mindfulness as a spiritual practice.
Yes.
Yet you use it as a psychological tool.
And it actually is both. And for many years, I have been using mindfulness. I think I got heavily into that as a practice when I was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer 8 years ago. And I wanted to use every tool that I could for mind, body, and soul to help me in my recovery.
Is all good now?
Yes,
good,
yeah,
good.
8 years cancer-free, woohoo.
Good for you.
But Mindful magazine is now a popular magazine, but the very first edition of that magazine 8 years ago did a story about me using mindfulness to help in my recovery. So it has been a spiritual practice, and it was very powerful for me. And then I started introducing it to my clients as a psychological tool, and I could see the immediate benefits of it. So it's both for psychology and spirituality.
Can you lead us through a mindfulness practice? Is that something that
Absolutely.
we could do? And I know during the break you mentioned to Claudette about the results that you've seen with teaching kids mindfulness and how they were able to resolve something simply through mindfulness.
Okay, so Claudette and I were chatting on the break about the work that I've done in school systems, and I can say literally thousands and thousands of children have had mindfulness training over my 27-year plus career, even before it was called mindfulness, when I called it stress management or whatever for kids. And I do see the benefits. This year, for example, all the children at Octagon Pond Elementary, which is about 600 children, received mindfulness training and using my book, The Mindful Turtle. And actually, it was a gym teacher who told me this story, that he had a grade 1 class, and the little boy was experiencing, I guess it was separation anxiety. He was crying. He said his belly hurt, and he wanted to go home with his mom. And a little girl in his class went over and put her arm around him and said, let's sit down and do some belly breathing. So a breathing technique to help calm him. And he said within a few minutes, the teacher said the two kids were running around the gym again.
That's powerful, isn't it?
That is really powerful
Yeah,
for a 6-year-old to be able to be in the moment, to be able to recognize a problem and to be able to identify a solution.
Yeah.
And, I mean, some adults wouldn't be able to.
I know. I'll share another example too. I had a parent from another school called me up to thank me for doing the mindfulness training at Holy Family School. And her children were they were probably like 8 and 10 years old. And she said, well, mornings here was always chaos. The kids would get up and they'd be fighting and arguing. And she said, now they'll sit down and eat their breakfast mindfully, and there's not a peep out of them.
That's every parent's goal, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So, Florence, can you lead us through a simple mindfulness exercise?
Our breath is with us wherever we go, so we can always practice mindfulness of breathing no matter where we are. So to start this exercise, I'd like for everyone, our listeners, to get comfortable in their seat. And you can either close your eyes, or if you're not comfortable closing your eyes, just gaze softly at the floor. And I want you to just notice how you naturally breathe. So you're not changing your breath in any way. You're just allowing your breath to come and go naturally. And you're becoming aware or mindful of where in your body you feel your breath. You might feel, for example, a cool sensation in your nostrils as you breathe in, and maybe a warmer sensation as you exhale. Be mindful or notice of where you feel your breath. Could be in your throat, in your nostrils, or maybe in your chest or belly. Just notice how the body naturally breathes itself. Become aware of the cycle of the breath. The inhale, a pause, exhale, and pause. You will notice that thoughts will come in uninvited, and that's okay. The purpose of this practice is not to get rid of your thoughts, but don't follow that thought. Don't chase after it. Just notice that you're having a thought and bring your mind back to the breath. To keep my mind focused, I sometimes repeat a little mantra. I might say in my mind on every in-breath, breathe in, breathe out on the out-breath. So for the next few seconds, I just want you to silently repeat, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. And now take a nice big deep cleansing breath. Take in your biggest breath of the day and exhale it with a sigh. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes and come back to the room.
To me, that's just automatically relaxing.
Mm-hmm.
So, Florence, if someone wanted to start a mindfulness practice of their own, would you suggest they start with breathing?
Breathing is a great and easy way to start the practice, using your senses. If you think about mindful eating, there's a whole thing called mindful eating. So normally, a lot of us, you're rushed that you just sit down and gobble down the food. You don't notice the temperature, the texture, the taste. You're just eating it. But even if you take the opportunity to eat the first 3 bites of your food in silence and mindfully and just noticing the food. So that's an easy starting place. Practicing mindfulness of breathing is another thing you can do. You're driving, instead of, spiraling with your thoughts, you just notice around you. What do I see? What do I hear? What do I smell? Walks in nature, beautiful opportunity for being mindful. I'll tell you a funny story that one of my clients allowed me to share this story, and I've shared it many times in presentations that I do on mindfulness. He had a lot of anxiety about his work, and his mind was always spiraling. He was an excellent client. He always did his action plan or his homework between sessions. So one of the things, I had him practice breathing exercises. He had a meditation app on his phone, and he'd do mindfulness. So there's a whole lot of things in positive self-talk. He was taking all of the tools and using them. So he worked on a turnaround, and every time he'd come back to St. John's, he'd come see me, and he'd tell me how he was using his tools. So at one point, it was in the spring, about a year or so ago, and he said, this is the best turnaround I've ever had. I'm feeling so good now. I don't know what it is, but I'm feeling great. And I said, are you using your skills? And he said, yeah. He said, I'm still using that Calm app on my phone, and I'm doing that positive self-talk, and, I'm doing the breathing stuff. And I said, what about mindfulness? Are you practicing mindfulness? No, I haven't really been doing mindfulness exercises anymore. I said, oh, yeah. And he said, but every day since I'm home, I'm going for a walk in Bowring Park. And I'm starting to notice, the robins are back, and I'm hearing them singing. And he said, the grass is turning green, and I'm seeing the tulips and the daffodils are starting to bloom. And the the air is feeling so warm. I said, so you're being mindful? No, I'm not practicing the mindfulness exercises.
It's his autopilot.
It became natural. And that's the whole purpose, is
exactly.
that you don't, and once somebody asked me, how long do I have to keep doing these mindfulness exercises before they work? Until it becomes your natural way of being.
Until it becomes your natural way of being, yeah. So, Florence, can you leave our listeners with a takeaway.
So the topic I came here to talk about is mindfulness with children or stress management for kids. But I think what I've demonstrated, I hope, is that the same techniques that work for a 5-year-old work for a 75-year-old, and they work for every age in between. It may seem very simple, but they are very, very powerful techniques for mental health, and that people can make very small changes to their lives by just practicing things like mindfulness, noticing their breathing and doing more positive self-talk, as we talked about affirmations and giving yourself those positive messages. And that is what makes the difference to overall mental health and well-being.
If someone wanted to get in touch with you or even get a copy of The Mindful Turtle, it costs $5.99. It's a pretty wide...
It's a big audience.
It's a big audience.
Yeah, the book is available at Kohl's and Chapters in the local author section as well. You can get it on Amazon. I have 2 websites. So my name, florencestrang.com. You can see my books and my work there. And my psychology practice is called Mindful Matters. So the website is mindfulmattersnl.com.
Perfect. Great conversation, Florence.
Thanks, Florence. We'll be back next week again with Florence to talk about another book she wrote that she collaborated with 2 other people. So we'll talk to Florence again next week.